You think Christmas cooking was always the same tired dishes every year? Think again. The 1960s and 70s filled holiday tables with recipes so unforgettable that families treasured them for generations, now fading fast. Let's dig into 60 Christmas recipes from the 1960s and 70s that have disappeared. Hot German potato salad brought old-world tradition to American Christmas tables. Its warm, tangy dressing a welcome contrast to cold, mayonnaise-based versions. Cooks sliced boiled potatoes while still warm, knowing they absorbed flavors better than cold ones. Bacon was fried crisp in cast iron, then removed while its fat became the base for a dressing of vinegar, sugar, and mustard. Sliced onions softened in the hot grease before potatoes joined the pan, tumbled gently to coat every piece. The bacon was crumbled back in at the last moment to preserve its crunch. Served warm in crockery bowls, this salad steamed on holiday buffets alongside cold cuts and roasted meats. The sweet-sour balance cut through rich holiday foods perfectly. German immigrant families passed down precise vinegar-to-sugar ratios, each household believing theirs achieved harmony. Children who normally resisted potato salad often loved this version, won over by the bacon and warmth. Hot German potato salad represented heritage on the plate, connecting American celebrations to European roots. Scrambled eggs with onions and peppers cooked in bacon grease created Thanksgiving meals that were colorful, flavorful, and economical. Fresh eggs were beaten until frothy, then poured into skillets where bacon had just been fried, leaving behind precious drippings. Diced onions and bell peppers, often saved from preparing dinner vegetables, were added directly as the eggs cooked. The vegetables softened while adding sweetness and texture. This breakfast used ingredients already in the kitchen for dinner preparations, preventing additional expense. Grandmothers cooked in large cast-iron skillets, making enough to feed 10 or more people. The bacon grease added richness and savory depth that butter couldn't match. Children picked out the peppers but ate the eggs eagerly. Adults appreciated the protein and vegetables, knowing the breakfast would sustain them through hours of cooking. Scrambled eggs with onions and peppers proved simple ingredients could create satisfaction. Creamed celery was the sophisticated cousin of other creamed vegetables, turning the overlooked stalk into something worthy of fine china and silver spoons. Cooks sliced celery on the diagonal and simmered it until tender, then folded it into rich white sauce enriched with cream and butter. Seasonings were delicate: white pepper, a touch of nutmeg, perhaps parsley for color. The celery retained gentle crunch even in the sauce, providing textural interest other creamed vegetables lacked. This was a dish for formal dinners and holiday gatherings, its mild elegance complementing rather than competing with richer offerings. Pale green and white colors added sophistication to tables heavy with browns. Some cooks topped creamed celery with toasted almonds, creating a gratin that bordered on indulgent. The dish required fresh celery at its crispest, making winter holidays the perfect occasion. Creamed celery has virtually disappeared from modern menus, a casualty of changing tastes that forgot how refined simple vegetables could become. Leftover ham biscuits made from holiday ham scraps became Thanksgiving morning sandwiches that children grabbed before running outside. Small pieces of ham left from trimming the holiday roast were diced and stuffed into split biscuits, sometimes with butter or mustard spread inside. These portable breakfasts could be eaten with one hand, making them perfect for active mornings. The ham provided protein and salt that woke up taste buds, while the biscuits offered satisfying bread that filled stomachs. Grandmothers made dozens of biscuits the day before, knowing they could be repurposed throughout the holiday. Children appreciated the convenience and familiar flavors. Adults valued how the scraps that might have been discarded became proper breakfast, proving nothing was too small. Leftover ham biscuits showed the thrift that defined Black Southern cooking, demonstrating how even small scraps deserved respect and could become meals families enjoyed. Carrot copper pennies were a make-ahead marvel that freed Christmas cooks from last-minute vegetable preparation. Carrots were sliced into thin coins, blanched until tender, then marinated for days in a tangy sauce of tomato soup, oil, vinegar, and Worcestershire sauce. The coins absorbed the bright orange-red marinade until they glistened like polished copper. Green bell pepper rings and sliced onions joined the carrots, adding color contrast and crunch. What made copper pennies invaluable was their timing. They actually improved with age, developing deeper flavor after 3 or 4 days in the refrigerator. Busy hostesses could prepare them the weekend before Christmas, freeing precious hours on the holiday itself. Served cold straight from the jar, they required no reheating or fussing. The dish appeared at church potlucks and family gatherings throughout the season. Carrot copper pennies proved that practical cooking could also be delicious, a lesson in efficiency that modern meal preppers have rediscovered. Leftover sweet potato pie filling spread on toast became Thanksgiving morning sweetness that used every bit of holiday preparation. When grandmothers made sweet potato pies for dinner, extra filling often remained in the mixing bowl. Rather than wasted, the spiced sweet potato mixture was spread thick on toasted bread, creating breakfast that tasted like dessert. The filling contained eggs, milk, sugar, and warm spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, making it nutritious as well as delicious. Children loved this unexpected treat, feeling like they were getting away with eating pie for breakfast. Adults enjoyed the creative repurposing, appreciating how nothing was wasted. The sweet potatoes provided vitamins and fiber while the toast offered substance and texture. This breakfast cost nothing extra since it used ingredients already prepared for the day's feast. Leftover sweet potato pie filling on toast represented the ultimate waste-not wisdom, showing how grandmothers viewed every ingredient as precious. Stuffed celery was the appetizer that kept hands busy and conversation flowing while holiday dinners finished cooking in crowded kitchens. Celery stalks were cut into uniform lengths, their natural curves creating perfect boats for various fillings. Cream cheese mixed with blue cheese crumbles was one popular option, while pimento cheese offered southern flair. Some hostesses piped the filling in decorative ridges, while others simply spread it before arranging stalks on trays. The preparation was simple enough for children to help, making it a task assigned to young hands eager to contribute. Guests would gather in living rooms, reaching for celery sticks between sips of punch. The cool crunch of celery against creamy filling provided textural pleasure that elaborate appetizers couldn't match. Stuffed celery represented the transition from everyday snack to party food. Nothing more than celery dressed up for company. Its disappearance from modern tables seems strange given its simplicity and timeless appeal. Leftover dressing fried into patties became Thanksgiving morning transformation that gave new life to yesterday's carefully prepared side dish that might otherwise have gone to waste. Cornbread dressing left from testing recipes was formed into palm-sized patties and fried in butter until crusty outside and soft inside. The herbs, onions, and celery in the dressing provided complex savory flavor, while frying added golden crust that made them irresistible to both children and adults alike. These patties could be eaten with eggs or alone, providing filling breakfast that satisfied without being heavy or overwhelming. Grandmothers valued this technique because it used food that might otherwise go stale, showing the waste-not philosophy that guided their kitchens every single day without exception. Children enjoyed the crispy exterior and familiar flavors that reminded them of holiday dinners. Adults appreciated how the patties felt special and intentional rather than like simple leftovers. Orange fluff was the cloud-like confection that children circled back to throughout holiday meals, its sherbet orange color standing out among earth-toned dishes. Orange gelatin was dissolved and mixed with cottage cheese, whipped topping, mandarin orange segments, and miniature marshmallows until impossibly light and airy. The cottage cheese provided protein and subtle tang that balanced sweetness, while marshmallows added pockets of chewy texture. Chilled until set, but still soft, orange fluff was served in glass bowls where its sunset color glowed invitingly. Some versions added crushed pineapple or chopped pecans, but purists kept the base simple. The dish required no cooking and could be assembled days ahead, perfect for busy holiday schedules. Children often asked for orange fluff specifically, knowing it would appear at Thanksgiving and Christmas without fail. Orange fluff represented the era's love of convenience desserts dressed up as salads, occupying that sweet spot between side dish and treat. Fried salt pork with gravy over toast was Thanksgiving morning protein using preserved meat to create richness families couldn't afford fresh. Salt pork, the preserved fatback that lasted months without refrigeration, was sliced thin and fried until crispy in cast-iron skillets. The rendered fat was used to make gravy by adding flour and milk, creating creamy sauce poured over toasted bread. This breakfast provided essential calories and fat, helping families survive cold mornings before central heating. The salt pork was economical because it used pig parts preserved through salting to last through seasons. Grandmothers kept slabs in cool places, slicing off pieces as needed. The gravy stretched the meat to feed larger groups, with toast soaking up every drop. Children learned to appreciate this combination. Adults valued how the breakfast delivered energy without requiring fresh meat purchases. Salt pork with gravy was honest nourishment, proving preserved foods could create satisfaction. Butter beans with ham hocks brought Southern comfort to Christmas tables, their creamy texture and smoky depth satisfying appetites like few vegetables could. Dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered for hours with a meaty ham hock until both beans and meat surrendered to tenderness. The cooking liquid reduced into a rich pot liquor that coated every bean with silky, porky goodness. Some cooks added onion, bay leaves, or a pinch of sugar to balance flavors, though purists let the ham and beans speak for themselves. The dish required time more than skill. Long, slow cooking was the only secret. Served in deep bowls with cornbread for soaking up the liquor, butter beans with ham hocks could anchor a meal or accompany the main roast. Grandmothers in the South passed down their timing instincts, knowing exactly when beans reached that perfect creamy yet whole texture. The dish connected Christmas to everyday survival cooking, reminding families that humble ingredients prepared with care could grace any occasion. Fried apples with cinnamon served alongside breakfast meats created Thanksgiving morning sweetness that balanced savory plates. Fresh apples were sliced thin and fried in butter with brown sugar and cinnamon until they softened and caramelized. The apples turned golden and sweet, their natural flavor intensified by the spices. Served beside eggs or sausage, they provided fruit that felt like indulgence. This dish appeared on Thanksgiving because fall apples were plentiful and affordable. Grandmothers prepared them quickly, knowing the sweet, savory combination would please everyone. Children loved the sugary apples, eating them eagerly. Adults appreciated how the fruit added variety without requiring much effort. Fried apples with cinnamon represented the Southern tradition of balancing meals with both sweet and savory elements, creating satisfaction through contrast that made every plate more interesting. Scalloped oysters were a Christmas tradition in coastal communities where briny bivalves signified celebration and abundance. Layers of shucked oysters nestled between buttery cracker crumbs in shallow baking dishes, each layer doused with oyster liquor, cream, and butter. Seasonings were simple: salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce to enhance oceanic flavor. The casserole baked until tops turned golden while oysters beneath plumped and released juices into the cream. The result was rich and delicate, soft oysters against crunchy cracker layers. For families with New England or Southern roots, this dish carried generations of memory, appearing on holiday tables reliably as the tree itself. Children often developed their taste for oysters through this dish, familiar crackers making unusual protein approachable. The smell alone announced Christmas had arrived. Though fresh oysters remain available, scalloped oysters have largely faded, remembered now mainly by elders who associate the dish with their finest holiday memories. Fried hominy with onions and butter became Thanksgiving morning comfort that connected families to Native American and African culinary traditions. Canned hominy, those large white corn kernels processed with lye, were drained and fried in butter with sliced onions until everything turned golden. The hominy developed crispy exteriors while staying soft inside, and the onions caramelized into sweetness. This breakfast was filling, affordable, and quick to prepare. Hominy represented the indigenous knowledge that African Americans adopted and adapted, creating dishes honoring multiple heritage streams. The corn's substantial texture provided satisfaction. Children enjoyed the mild flavor and interesting texture. Adults valued how the dish provided lasting energy without requiring much time or money. Fried hominy with onions proved that simple preparation could honor complex cultural histories. Sweet potato soufflé was the showstopper that made guests gasp when it emerged from the oven, puffed high and golden like an edible cloud. Unlike dense casseroles, the soufflé required whipping potatoes with eggs separated carefully, yolks beaten into warm puree, whites whipped stiff and folded in at the last moment. The mixture was seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla, sweetened with brown sugar, and sometimes enriched with bourbon. Baked in a straight-sided dish, it would rise dramatically, its top browning while the interior stayed impossibly light. Timing was everything. The soufflé had to travel from oven to table immediately before it could deflate. Children pressed their faces to oven doors, watching the miraculous rise with wonder. The texture was unlike anything else, simultaneously creamy and ethereal, sweet but not cloying. Sweet potato soufflé represented kitchen ambition, a willingness to attempt something difficult for the reward of witnessing that collective intake of breath around the table. Rice pudding with raisins and nutmeg turned leftover rice into Thanksgiving morning sweetness that felt like dessert before the day started. Cold rice was mixed with milk, eggs, sugar, and plump raisins, then baked slowly until creamy and set. Nutmeg grated fresh over the top provided warm spice that made kitchens smell like celebration. This breakfast repurposed rice left from earlier meals, ensuring nothing was wasted. The pudding could be served warm or cold, making it versatile for busy mornings. Families treasured it because it tasted indulgent while using ingredients already on hand. Children picked out the raisins if they didn't like them, but adults savored every spoonful. The custard-like texture created comfort, while the sweetness provided energy. Rice pudding with raisins wasn't just thrifty cooking, but genuine deliciousness that happened to use leftovers. Squash casserole was Southern comfort baked golden, turning summer's yellow crookneck squash into a dish hearty enough for winter celebrations. Sliced squash was simmered until tender, then mashed with eggs, butter, and sugar until almost custard-like. Crushed crackers topped the mixture, browning into crispy crust during baking that contrasted beautifully with creamy interior. The natural sweetness of squash intensified with cooking, making this acceptable to children who might refuse vegetables. Some recipes added cheese for savory depth, while others emphasized sweetness. The dish could be assembled ahead, requiring only baking before serving. Squash casserole represented the Southern tradition of treating vegetables as worthy of indulgent preparation, butter and eggs transforming humble squash into something memorable. Baked cheese grits casserole prepared the night before allowed grandmothers to focus on Thanksgiving dinner, while breakfast took care of itself. Cooked grits were mixed with eggs, sharp cheddar cheese, butter, and milk, then poured into baking dishes and refrigerated overnight. Thanksgiving morning, the casserole baked until set and golden, filling kitchens with savory aromas. This breakfast could feed large groups with minimal morning effort. The eggs and cheese provided protein while the grits delivered comforting carbohydrates. Families cut squares and served them hot, sometimes with hot sauce. The casserole represented forward-thinking meal planning. It could be prepared when time allowed, then baked when needed. Children loved the cheesy richness while adults appreciated the practicality. Baked cheese grits casserole proved planning ahead created stress-free Thanksgiving mornings. Mint peas with butter were the bright green accent that added freshness to plates heavy with brown meats and beige starches. Frozen peas were cooked briefly, then tossed with butter and mint that transformed them from ordinary vegetable to something almost sophisticated. The mint provided unexpected brightness, its cool flavor cutting through rich gravies and heavy casseroles. The peas remained vibrant green, their color adding visual appeal to plates that desperately needed something fresh. Children who normally avoided vegetables often accepted mint peas, the familiar sweetness enhanced rather than masked by the herb. Some cooks added cream or lemon, though purists insisted butter and mint were sufficient. The dish required almost no effort, a few minutes of cooking and tossing, yet contributed significantly to the overall meal. Mint peas with butter represented the simple wisdom that sometimes vegetables need only gentle treatment to shine alongside more elaborate preparations. Sweet and sour red cabbage brought German heritage to American Christmas tables, its purple-red color adding drama to plates dominated by browns. Shredded cabbage was braised slowly with apples, onions, vinegar, sugar, and warming spices until tender and deeply flavored. The long cooking allowed sweet-sour balance to develop fully. Cloves and bay leaves added complexity, while apple pieces contributed natural sweetness. This dish was traditionally served alongside roast goose or pork, its acidity cutting through rich meats perfectly. The cabbage could be made days ahead and reheated, improving as flavors melded. Children often surprised themselves by enjoying it, the sweetness making the unfamiliar vegetable approachable. Sweet and sour red cabbage represented immigrant traditions that enriched American holiday tables, proving the best dishes traveled across oceans. Fried apple hand pies made from dough scraps turned yesterday's pie making into today's breakfast feast. After preparing pies for dinner, grandmother saved every scrap of dough, rolling them thin and filling them with spiced apples cooked down with sugar and cinnamon. The small pockets were sealed tight, then fried in hot lard until golden brown and crispy outside while the filling bubbled inside. Children woke to the smell of frying dough and sweet apples. These hand pies were portable, perfect for eating while helping with preparations. The cost was nearly nothing since they used scraps that would otherwise be discarded, proving waste not wisdom. Families made dozens, stacking them on plates covered with towels to stay warm. Adults paired them with strong black coffee while children drank milk. Fried apple hand pies weren't about elegance but making joy from leftovers. They represented creativity that turned scarcity into celebration. Creamed spinach was the elegant green that appeared at formal holiday tables, transforming a vegetable many children feared into something rich enough to tempt skeptics. Fresh or frozen spinach was cooked until tender, then folded into bechamel sauce enriched with cream and nutmeg. The result was silky and indulgent, spinach's slight bitterness mellowed by dairy richness. Served in small portions from silver bowls, creamed spinach added sophistication to tables that might otherwise feel rustic. Some versions incorporated cream cheese for body, while others kept the sauce light to let spinach shine. The dish required careful preparation. Overcooking turned spinach army green, but rewards justified the attention. Creamed spinach represented the era's appreciation for vegetables treated as worthy of the same care as meats and desserts, elevated beyond nutrition. Spiced crab apples were the garnish that elevated holiday platters from ordinary to elegant, their deep ruby color and clove-studded skins announcing celebration. Whole crab apples were simmered in sweetened vinegar syrup infused with cinnamon sticks, cloves, and allspice until they turned translucent and tender. The fruits were packed into jars with their spiced liquid and stored for weeks, improving as flavors concentrated. Come Christmas, they were arranged around roasts and hams like edible jewels, their glossy skins catching candlelight beautifully. The taste was intensely sweet-tart, with warming spice notes that complemented rich meats. Some families made their own from backyard trees, while others relied on store-bought versions. Children often avoided them, but adults treasured spiced crab apples as essential holiday tradition. The jars themselves became gifts, wrapped in ribbon for neighbors. Spiced crab apples represented the artistry of preservation, autumn's harvest transformed into winter's ornament. Oatmeal sweetened with brown sugar and butter was Thanksgiving morning warmth that stuck to ribs and provided lasting energy. The oatmeal was cooked slowly with water or milk until thick and creamy, then sweetened with brown sugar that melted into caramel sweetness. A pat of butter stirred in added richness. This breakfast was economical because oats were cheap, filling, and lasted through cold mornings. In Black households where children needed fuel before the day's activities, oatmeal provided complex carbohydrates that released energy slowly. Grandmothers cooked large pots, serving bowls to everyone gathered around the table. Children might have preferred sweet treats, but learned to appreciate oatmeal's comforting warmth. Adults valued how the simple bowl kept hunger at bay for hours. Oatmeal with brown sugar and butter represented practical nutrition that didn't require expensive ingredients but still tasted good. Butter beans with ham hocks brought Southern comfort to Christmas tables, their creamy texture and smoky depth satisfying appetites like few vegetables could. Dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered for hours with a meaty ham hock until both beans and meat surrendered to tenderness. The cooking liquid reduced into a rich pot liquor that coated every bean with silky, porky goodness. Some cooks added onion, bay leaves, or a pinch of sugar to balance flavors, though purists let the ham and beans speak for themselves. The dish required time more than skill. Long, slow cooking was the only secret. Served in deep bowls with cornbread for soaking up the liquor, butter beans with ham hocks could anchor a meal or accompany the main roast. Grandmothers in the South passed down their timing instincts, knowing exactly when beans reached that perfect creamy yet whole texture. The dish connected Christmas to everyday survival cooking, reminding families that humble ingredients prepared with care could grace any occasion. Pan-fried liver mush with mustard on toast was Thanksgiving morning protein using preserved organ meat to create hearty breakfast. Liver mush, that Appalachian creation combining pork liver with cornmeal and spices, was sliced and fried until the exterior crisped while the interior stayed creamy. Served on toasted bread with sharp mustard, it provided sustaining nutrition. This breakfast appeared in Black households influenced by Appalachian foodways, where cultures overlapped. The liver mush was economical because organ meats were cheaper than muscle meat but packed with nutrients. Grandmothers fried it quickly, creating breakfast that lasted through morning preparations. Children acquired the taste gradually. Adults valued how the small serving provided significant protein and energy. Pan-fried liver mush with mustard represented the blending of regional traditions and practical wisdom of using every part of available animals. Broccoli rice casserole became a 1970s Christmas staple when convenience products merged with home cooking to create something families genuinely craved. Cooks combined cooked rice with chopped broccoli, then folded in cream of mushroom soup and processed cheese spread that melted into golden richness. Some recipes called for sautéed onions and celery, adding layers of flavor beneath the creamy base. The mixture was baked until bubbling around the edges, the top developing golden spots where cheese had caramelized. The texture was comfort itself, creamy rice studded with tender broccoli, every bite coated in savory cheese sauce. Children who refused plain broccoli would eat it gladly when disguised in this casserole, making it a parental victory as much as a side dish. The recipe appeared in community cookbooks across America. Broccoli rice casserole represented an era when processed ingredients were celebrated, when feeding families well meant using every shortcut available. Canned biscuits with jelly were Thanksgiving morning convenience that gave grandmothers precious time to focus on more complex preparations for the elaborate feast that would feed extended family. Store-bought refrigerated biscuits were baked quickly according to simple package directions and served warm with homemade or store-bought jelly spread generously on top for sweetness. This breakfast wasn't homemade from scratch, but still provided warm bread and sweetness that satisfied morning hunger effectively and completely. In modern Black households where time was precious and multiple dishes demanded attention simultaneously throughout the busy morning, canned biscuits represented acceptable shortcuts that didn't compromise quality or tradition significantly. Children didn't know or care that the biscuits came from a cardboard tube rather than grandmother's skilled hands. They just enjoyed warm bread with sweet jelly that made them happy and content. Popcorn balls wrapped in wax paper were the kind of homemade gift that came straight from the heart. The popcorn was popped over the stove, the syrup boiled just enough to turn golden and sticky, and the whole kitchen filled with the smell of caramel and butter. Once the syrup hit the popcorn, there was no going back. Hands were greased, laughter filled the room, and everyone rolled them into perfect little globes of sweetness. They cooled on pans before being wrapped carefully in wax paper, tied with ribbon, and slipped into baskets for neighbors and friends. It was candy you could hold, made from the simplest of ingredients and given with genuine warmth. Before store-bought chocolates and tins of cookies took over, popcorn balls were how families said, "We thought of you." You could eat them on the walk home from caroling or hang them on the tree for decoration. They were crunchy, cheerful, and proudly imperfect, the kind of treat that disappeared as quickly as it cooled. Eggnog ice cream loaf was the frozen echo of Christmas mornings when the house smelled of spice, laughter, and pine. It began with homemade eggnog, rich cream, nutmeg, sugar, and a hint of rum, transformed into something smooth, cold, and festive. The mixture was poured into decorative molds, frozen overnight, and sliced like cake, each piece pale gold with ribbons of whipped cream or bits of candied fruit. Served on chilled plates, it melted slowly into a creamy sweetness that felt both nostalgic and new. Families adored its novelty. It turned a familiar drink into something you could serve with ceremony. In the glow of holiday lights, each bite felt like luxury on a modest budget, a miracle that only a freezer could make. For children, it was pure magic, the promise of snow in dessert form. It wasn't just a recipe, it was a celebration of patience and imagination. But as pre-made desserts, crowded store shelves, and convenience took center stage, the eggnog loaf quietly faded from memory. Still, its memory lingers in whispers of vanilla and spice, a dessert that once turned winter cold into something warm enough to remember forever. Butterscotch Drops were the amber-colored candies that delivered rich, buttery sweetness in every slow-dissolving piece. Mothers cooked brown sugar, butter, and corn syrup together until the mixture reached hard crack stage, the butter creating a richness that plain sugar candy couldn't match. Dropped by spoonfuls onto greased baking sheets, each candy spread into a flat disc with slightly ruffled edges. The color ranged from pale gold to deep amber, depending on how long the sugar cooked, with darker candies carrying slightly caramelized, almost burnt notes. Children loved the way butterscotch melted slowly in their mouths, releasing waves of buttery flavor that seemed to last forever. Some mothers added a splash of vanilla or a pinch of salt to enhance the butterscotch taste. These candies were perfect for tucking into pockets and lunchboxes, hard enough to survive without melting or crumbling. Butterscotch Drops represented simple candy making at its finest, requiring only basic ingredients and careful temperature control. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Hot German potato salad brought old-world tradition to American Christmas tables, its warm, tangy dressing a welcome contrast to cold, mayonnaise-based versions. Cooks sliced boiled potatoes while still warm, knowing they absorbed flavors better than cold ones. Bacon was fried crisp in cast iron, then removed while its fat became the base for a dressing of vinegar, sugar, and mustard. Sliced onions softened in the hot grease before potatoes joined the pan, tumbled gently to coat every piece. The bacon was crumbled back in at the last moment to preserve its crunch. Served warm in crockery bowls, this salad steamed on holiday buffets alongside cold cuts and roasted meats. The sweet-sour balance cut through rich holiday foods perfectly. German immigrant families passed down precise vinegar-to-sugar ratios, each household believing theirs achieved harmony. Children who normally resisted potato salad often loved this version, won over by the bacon and warmth. Hot German potato salad represented heritage on the plate, connecting American celebrations to European roots. Martha Washington candy was the chocolate-covered confection filled with sweetened coconut and condensed milk that children found irresistible. Mothers mixed shredded coconut with sweetened condensed milk, butter, and powdered sugar, then chilled the mixture until firm enough to roll into balls. Each ball was dipped in melted chocolate and set on waxed paper to harden, creating smooth, dark shells around creamy white centers. The texture contrast was immediate, chocolate snapping to reveal soft, intensely sweet coconut filling. Named for the First Lady, these candies carried a sense of American tradition and patriotic pride. Children loved helping roll the coconut mixture, their small hands creating balls of varying sizes that mothers then perfected. The candies kept well in cool places, making them ideal for gift boxes and holiday cookie plates. Martha Washington candy was often a mother's secret weapon, simple enough for beginners but impressive enough to earn compliments from experienced bakers. Eggnog punch with vanilla ice cream was the taste of Christmas excess, cold, rich, and loud with laughter. It started with homemade eggnog, thick with cream, sugar, and beaten eggs, poured into wide crystal bowls and crowned with scoops of soft vanilla ice cream. The two swirled together into a pale golden froth, bubbling with sweetness and warmth. Nutmeg dusted the top like snowfall, and the scent of spice, milk, and rum filled every corner of the house. Guests leaned in for a cup, smiling as the ice cream melted into silk. It was a drink meant to be shared, indulgent, but sincere, and it turned gatherings into celebrations. Housewives loved it because it was both simple and impressive, the kind of thing that made everyone linger a little longer. When store-bought cartons and paper cups took over, the ritual faded into memory. The silver ladle, the punch bowl, the soft clink of glasses, all became echoes of a slower, sweeter time. But even now, one creamy sip of eggnog brings back that glow, the laughter, the music, and the sense that Christmas was something you could taste. Tomato aspic was the elegant mold that separated sophisticated hostesses from casual cooks, its shimmering clarity announcing refinement on any holiday table. Tomato juice was combined with unflavored gelatin, lemon juice, Worcestershire sauce, and careful seasoning, then poured into decorative molds to set. The result was a quivering ruby ring that held its shape when unmolded onto beds of crisp lettuce. Some versions included chopped celery, olives, or shrimp suspended within like jewels in amber. The taste was intensely savory, nothing like sweet fruit gelatins that dominated other parts of the meal. Aspic required confidence, as unmolding could go wrong if the gelatin hadn't set properly. Successful unmolding brought genuine pride, the mold releasing perfectly onto its serving platter with a satisfying wobble. Tomato aspic represented formal entertaining from an earlier era, when certain dishes signaled social knowledge. Its disappearance marked changing tastes that favor simplicity over structured elegance. Hard candy drops were the jewel-toned confections that mothers poured into molds or dropped onto marble slabs, each piece catching light like stained glass. Sugar, corn syrup, and water were boiled to the hard crack stage, then quickly mixed with food coloring and flavoring before being poured into shapes. The process required speed and precision. Hard candy set within minutes and couldn't be reworked once it cooled. Lemon drops glowed yellow, cinnamon discs burned red, and mint rounds sparkled green, creating a rainbow on every candy dish. Children loved sucking on these candies, feeling them slowly dissolve and release intense bursts of flavor. Some mothers used antique molds passed down through generations, pressing candy into shapes of Christmas trees, bells, and stars. The candies kept for weeks in tins, making them perfect for gift-giving and stocking stuffers. Hard candy drops required mastering high-temperature sugar work, a skill that separated casual candy makers from serious Christmas confectioners. Golden glow salad was the 1970s dream of what good health should look like, a shimmering tower of orange optimism. It mixed orange juice, grated carrots, and crushed pineapple with gelatin, poured into molds that promised sunshine on the plate. Housewives praised its bright color and cheerful sweetness, proud to serve something that looked like both dessert and virtue. It was light, refreshing, and just sweet enough to satisfy without guilt, the kind of dish that seemed to make the whole meal more modern. Under fluorescent kitchen lights, it sparkled like stained glass, a victory for convenience and presentation alike. Kids might wrinkle their noses at the carrots, but mothers adored the ease, a salad that needed no dressing and never wilted. This was the era when canned fruit, gelatin, and instant mixes stood proudly as progress. Each shimmering slice reflected a belief that beauty and health could come straight from a box. When fresh salads took over and gelatin molds went out of style, Golden Glow salad quietly faded into memory. But it remains a perfect snapshot of an age that truly believed brightness could be served cold. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Candied carrots with brown sugar transformed an ordinary root vegetable into a glazed masterpiece that glistened under dining room chandeliers. Cooks sliced carrots into coins, then simmered them in butter and brown sugar until natural sugars caramelized into a sticky coating. Some recipes called for orange juice to brighten the sweetness, while others added cinnamon for warmth. The carrots emerged tender but not mushy, each piece wrapped in glossy amber glaze that caught candlelight beautifully. This dish bridged the gap between vegetable and dessert, making it popular with children who otherwise avoided anything orange on their plates. Grandmothers passed down specific butter-to-sugar ratios, guarding proportions like family secrets. The carrots were economical. A single bag could feed a dozen guests when properly prepared. Though they required constant attention to prevent burning, the reward was a side dish that disappeared faster than mashed potatoes. Candied carrots represented holiday indulgence applied to humble ingredients. Fruitcake icebox cookies were what happened when patience met practicality in a holiday kitchen. Bakers would mix shortbread dough with chopped candied fruit and nuts, roll it into logs, and tuck it away in tins to age. Over days, the flavors deepened, mellowed, and turned into something quietly spectacular. Each slice, speckled with reds and greens, looked like a stained glass window lit from within. Unlike fruitcakes, these cookies didn't demand months of soaking or layers of wrapping. They were simple, beautiful, and perfectly timed for Christmas week. Families loved them because they lasted long after the tree came down, a small comfort in the quiet days after the holiday rush. Today, most people don't wait for flavor to develop. They want sweetness right away. But these cookies remind us that some things taste better when time is allowed to do its work. Fried cornmeal hoe cakes with apple butter connected families to their agricultural heritage and survival traditions. The hoe cakes were mixed from cornmeal, water, and salt, then fried on hot griddles until golden brown with crispy edges. Apple butter made from fall apples cooked down with spices provided sweetness without expensive jam. This breakfast appeared on Thanksgiving because both cornmeal and apples were fall harvest products. Grandmothers made dozens of hoe cakes, stacking them high and keeping them warm under kitchen towels. The name itself carried history, referencing when field workers cooked cornmeal cakes on hoes over open fires. Children spread apple butter thick, enjoying the sweet tart flavor against earthy corn. Adults paired them with coffee, appreciating how the simple combination provided energy. Hoe cakes cost almost nothing but delivered satisfaction. They represented ingenuity of turning basic staples into something worth celebrating. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Peppermint bark layered dark and white chocolate with crushed candy canes into a festive treat that looked as beautiful as it tasted. Mothers would melt semi-sweet chocolate and spread it thin on waxed paper, letting it set until firm before adding a layer of white chocolate on top. While the white chocolate was still soft, crushed peppermint candy canes were pressed into the surface, their red and white stripes creating holiday color against the creamy background. Once fully hardened, the bark was broken into irregular shards that showed off the distinct layers. Each bite delivered the snap of tempered chocolate followed by cool peppermint that lingered on the tongue. Children loved the contrast of textures and flavors, the way the candy cane pieces crunched against smooth chocolate. Making bark required patience for proper tempering, but rewarded cooks with a candy that looked professional and tasted even better. It became a staple of cookie exchanges and holiday gift boxes, a treat that said Christmas without any words needed. Sugar-cured country ham biscuits were the kind of holiday snack that tasted like welcome itself. The rolls were soft and warm, baked golden and split open to hold thin slices of sweet, smoky ham. Brown sugar or honey glaze gave the meat its signature shine and flavor, and a touch of mustard added bite. They were passed around at church socials, candlelight suppers, and long nights of storytelling by the fire. Small enough for children's hands, hearty enough for working men, they turned gatherings into something more than meals. The smell alone could draw people from the next room. But as fast food and catering replaced homemade trays, those tender biscuits slipped out of Christmas tradition. Their taste lingers only in memory now, wrapped in wax paper and love. Spiced crab apples were the garnish that elevated holiday platters from ordinary to elegant, their deep ruby color and clove-studded skins announcing celebration. Whole crab apples were simmered in sweetened vinegar syrup infused with cinnamon sticks, cloves, and allspice until they turned translucent and tender. The fruits were packed into jars with their spiced liquid and stored for weeks, improving as flavors concentrated. Come Christmas, they were arranged around roasts and hams like edible jewels, their glossy skins catching candlelight beautifully. The taste was intensely sweet-tart, with warming spice notes that complemented rich meats. Some families made their own from backyard trees, while others relied on store-bought versions. Children often avoided them, but adults treasured spiced crab apples as essential holiday tradition. The jars themselves became gifts, wrapped in ribbon for neighbors. Spiced crab apples represented the artistry of preservation, autumn's harvest transformed into winter's ornament. Leftover greens mixed with scrambled eggs created Thanksgiving morning plates combining vegetables with protein economically. Collard greens or turnip greens from earlier cooking were chopped and stirred directly into beaten eggs, creating green-flecked scrambles. The greens added earthiness and nutrition while the eggs provided richness. This breakfast cost nothing extra since it used greens already cooked. Grandmothers understood that combining leftovers with fresh eggs made both components more interesting. The pot liquor from the greens seasoned the eggs naturally. Children might have resisted plain leftover greens but accepted them willingly when mixed with eggs. Adults appreciated the nutritional wisdom of combining vegetables with protein. Leftover greens with scrambled eggs proved that creative combinations could make yesterday's food feel new and intentional. Three-bean salad appeared at nearly every holiday gathering throughout the 1970s, its colorful layers making it as beautiful as it was economical. Green beans, yellow wax beans, and kidney beans were drained from cans and combined with sliced onions and bell peppers in large glass bowls. A marinade of oil, vinegar, sugar, and spices was poured over everything, Then the salad rested overnight while flavors melded. The result was tangy and crisp, each bean variety offering different texture and color. What made three-bean salad practical was its cost. Canned beans were inexpensive, and the salad stretched to feed crowds without straining budgets. It traveled well, too, making it a potluck favorite that arrived looking good. The dish required no heating and could sit at room temperature through long gatherings. Three-bean salad proved that simple preparations from pantry staples could earn places on festive tables alongside more elaborate offerings. Congealed cranberry salad was the jewel-toned centerpiece of holiday tables, a shimmering mold that turned canned cranberries into something worthy of celebration. Homemakers dissolved cherry gelatin in boiling water, then folded in whole cranberry sauce with chopped celery, walnuts, and crushed pineapple for texture. The mixture was poured into decorative ring molds, then chilled overnight until firm enough to unmold onto crisp lettuce leaves. The result was stunning. Deep ruby red with visible chunks of fruit and nuts suspended throughout like edible stained glass. Children watched in amazement as the wobbly creation held its shape on serving platters. The tartness of cranberries balanced the sweetness of gelatin, while celery provided unexpected crunch. This dish required planning and patience, qualities that defined holiday cooking before instant everything arrived. Today, it has largely vanished from Christmas spreads, replaced by simpler preparations that lack the artistry of waiting for that perfect gelatin set. Chocolate fudge was the rich, dense square that anchored every Christmas candy plate, its glossy surface promising sweetness that delivered completely. Mothers combined sugar, cocoa, butter, and milk in heavy saucepans, stirring constantly while the mixture bubbled to the soft ball stage. The critical moment came after removing from heat, beating until it lost its shine and began to set required arm strength and patience. Poured into buttered pans and scored while warm, the fudge cooled into perfect squares that were dense, smooth, and intensely chocolatey. Some mothers added walnuts or pecans, while purists kept it plain to showcase the cocoa flavor. The texture separated homemade from store-bought, tender enough to bite through easily yet firm enough to hold its shape. Children would sneak pieces before it fully set, knowing the slightly soft centers were the best part. Chocolate fudge represented the foundation of holiday candy making, the recipe every mother mastered before attempting anything more complicated. Creamed celery was the sophisticated cousin of other creamed vegetables, turning the overlooked stalk into something worthy of fine china and silver spoons. Cooks sliced celery on the diagonal and simmered it until tender, then folded it into rich white sauce enriched with cream and butter. Seasonings were delicate: white pepper, a touch of nutmeg, perhaps parsley for color. The celery retained gentle crunch even in the sauce, providing textural interest other creamed vegetables lacked. This was a dish for formal dinners and holiday gatherings, its mild elegance complementing rather than competing with richer offerings. Pale green and white colors added sophistication to tables heavy with browns. Some cooks topped creamed celery with toasted almonds, creating a gratin that bordered on indulgent. The dish required fresh celery at its crispest, making winter holidays the perfect occasion. Creamed celery has virtually disappeared from modern menus, a casualty of changing tastes that forgot how refined simple vegetables could become. Creamed pearl onions were a labor of love that few modern cooks would undertake, requiring patience to peel dozens of tiny onions before drowning them in velvety white sauce. Cooks blanched the pearl onions briefly, then slipped off papery skins one by one, a task often assigned to older children as their holiday contribution. The peeled onions were simmered in milk until tender, then folded into rich bechamel sauce seasoned with nutmeg and white pepper. The finished dish was creamy and mild, the sweetness of cooked onions mellowing into something almost buttery. Served in china bowls alongside the roast, creamed pearl onions added elegance to tables where everyday meals were simpler. Some families topped theirs with breadcrumbs and broiled them golden, adding textural contrast to the silky interior. The dish spoke of abundance and effort, qualities that defined holiday entertaining in an era when convenience foods were beginning to dominate. Today, the ritual of peeling has disappeared, along with the dish itself. Frozen fruit salad was the jewel of holiday buffets, its pastel sweetness providing cool contrast to hot, savory dishes crowding Christmas tables. Cream cheese was whipped with mayonnaise until smooth, then folded together with whipped cream, canned fruit cocktail, maraschino cherries, and miniature marshmallows. Some versions added crushed pineapple or mandarin oranges for extra fruit presence. The mixture was poured into loaf pans and frozen solid, then sliced into pink-tinged rounds that held their shape beautifully on lettuce-lined platters. The texture was unlike anything else on the table. Frozen yet creamy, sweet yet tangy from the cream cheese base. Children adored it, begging for extra slices, while adults appreciated how it could be made weeks in advance. The salad straddled categories, appearing sometimes with sides and sometimes with desserts. Frozen fruit salad represented the 1970s love of make-ahead entertaining, proving that planning could produce something genuinely delightful. Glazed country ham with cloves and pineapple rings was the king of mid-century Christmas dinners. It arrived at the table shining like gold, sweet glaze bubbling at the edges, the scent of sugar and smoke filling every corner of the house. Mothers would press whole cloves into the scored surface before covering it with pineapple rings that baked until caramelized. It was simple, showy, and proud, the kind of meal that said you'd made it through another year with something worth sharing. Families would carve it slowly, slices steaming, as laughter and conversation filled the air. The sticky crust and salty meat made the perfect contrast, a blend of celebration and hard-earned comfort. It was a meal you could count on, sturdy and satisfying. When turkey took the spotlight, this beautiful relic faded away, tucked behind modern menus and calorie counts. But in the glow of memory, the ham still glistens, waiting to be remembered. English toffee was the shatteringly crisp candy that coated kitchens in butter-scented clouds every time mothers made a batch. Sugar and butter were cooked together until deeply caramelized, then poured thin onto baking sheets and topped with melted chocolate and crushed almonds while still warm. The toffee had to reach exactly the right temperature. Too low and it stayed chewy, too high and it turned bitter. Once cooled, it was broken into irregular shards that ranged from paper-thin edges to thick, nutty centers. The texture was what made English toffee special, shattering between teeth before melting into buttery sweetness on the tongue. Children loved the combination of crispy toffee, smooth chocolate, and crunchy almonds in every bite. These candies were often packaged in decorative tins for gift-giving, their homemade quality impressing recipients who knew how difficult proper toffee could be. English toffee represented the pinnacle of sugar cooking skill in many Christmas candy traditions. Congealed cranberry salad was the jewel-toned centerpiece of holiday tables, a shimmering mold that turned canned cranberries into something worthy of celebration. Homemakers dissolved cherry gelatin in boiling water, then folded in whole cranberry sauce with chopped celery, walnuts, and crushed pineapple for texture. The mixture was poured into decorative ring molds, then chilled overnight until firm enough to unmold onto crisp lettuce leaves. The result was stunning. Deep ruby red with visible chunks of fruit and nuts suspended throughout like edible stained glass. Children watched in amazement as the wobbly creation held its shape on serving platters. The tartness of cranberries balanced the sweetness of gelatin, while celery provided unexpected crunch. This dish required planning and patience, qualities that defined holiday cooking before instant everything arrived. Today, it has largely vanished from Christmas spreads, replaced by simpler preparations that lack the artistry of waiting for that perfect gelatin set. Three-bean salad appeared at nearly every holiday gathering throughout the 1970s, its colorful layers making it as beautiful as it was economical. Green beans, yellow wax beans, and kidney beans were drained from cans and combined with sliced onions and bell peppers in large glass bowls. A marinade of oil, vinegar, sugar, and spices was poured over everything. Then the salad rested overnight while flavors melded. The result was tangy and crisp, each bean variety offering different texture and color. What made three-bean salad practical was its cost. Canned beans were inexpensive, and the salad stretched to feed crowds without straining budgets. It traveled well, too, making it a potluck favorite that arrived looking good. The dish required no heating and could sit at room temperature through long gatherings. Three-bean salad proved that simple preparations from pantry staples could earn places on festive tables alongside more elaborate offerings. Corn pudding was Southern hospitality baked into a custard, turning humble canned corn into something rich enough for Christmas tables. Cooks combined creamed corn with eggs, milk, butter, and sugar, sometimes adding flour to help it set. The mixture was poured into buttered dishes and cooked slowly until the top turned golden, while the interior remained soft and spoonable. The texture fell somewhere between cornbread and custard, dense yet creamy, with pops of whole kernels throughout. Some families added diced chilies for savory depth, while purists kept it simple. The dish required careful temperature management, as cooking too fast would curdle the eggs. Grandmothers knew exactly when to pull it from the oven, that moment when the center still jiggled slightly but would firm as it cooled. Corn pudding represented transformation of pantry staples into celebration food, proof that special occasions could be honored without expensive ingredients. Today it appears occasionally at Southern tables but has largely faded. Marinated mushrooms were the tangy appetizer that disappeared first from relish trays, their garlicky brine making them irresistible to adults. Button mushrooms were simmered briefly in olive oil, vinegar, garlic, and herbs until they absorbed the marinade completely. Chilled overnight, they emerged firm yet tender, earthy flavor enhanced by bright acidity. Served cold alongside olives and pickles, marinated mushrooms added sophistication to appetizer spreads. The mushrooms could be jarred and stored for weeks, improving in the flavorful liquid. Some cooks added red pepper flakes for heat, while others kept it simple with garlic and Italian herbs. The dish required minimal cooking but delivered impressive results, perfect for busy schedules. Marinated mushrooms represented growing appreciation for Mediterranean flavors, bringing garlic and olive oil to tables that had previously known only butter. Candied carrots with brown sugar transformed an ordinary root vegetable into a glazed masterpiece that glistened under dining room chandeliers. Cooks sliced carrots into coins, then simmered them in butter and brown sugar until natural sugars caramelized into a sticky coating. Some recipes called for orange juice to brighten the sweetness, while others added cinnamon for warmth. The carrots emerged tender but not mushy, each piece wrapped in glossy amber glaze that caught candlelight beautifully. This dish bridged the gap between vegetable and dessert, making it popular with children who otherwise avoided anything orange on their plates. Grandmothers passed down specific butter-to-sugar ratios, guarding proportions like family secrets. The carrots were economical. A single bag could feed a dozen guests when properly prepared. Though they required constant attention to prevent burning, the reward was a side dish that disappeared faster than mashed potatoes. Candied carrots represented holiday indulgence applied to humble ingredients. Creamed pearl onions were a labor of love that few modern cooks would undertake, requiring patience to peel dozens of tiny onions before drowning them in velvety white sauce. Cooks blanched the pearl onions briefly, then slipped off papery skins one by one, a task often assigned to older children as their holiday contribution. The peeled onions were simmered in milk until tender, then folded into rich bechamel sauce seasoned with nutmeg and white pepper. The finished dish was creamy and mild, the sweetness of cooked onions mellowing into something almost buttery. Served in china bowls alongside the roast, creamed pearl onions added elegance to tables where everyday meals were simpler. Some families topped theirs with breadcrumbs and broiled them golden, adding textural contrast to the silky interior. The dish spoke of abundance and effort, qualities that defined holiday entertaining in an era when convenience foods were beginning to dominate. Today, the ritual of peeling has disappeared, along with the dish itself. Grits with cheese and fried eggs became Thanksgiving morning fuel that prepared families for hours of cooking and welcoming relatives. The grits were cooked low and slow, stirred patiently until creamy, then mixed with sharp cheddar that melted into golden richness. Eggs fried in bacon grease created crispy edges and runny yolks that mixed with the grits like natural gravy. This combination delivered protein and energy in portions generous enough to last through morning chaos. In Black Southern households, grits weren't just breakfast, but foundation food connecting families to their agricultural roots. Grandmothers seasoned them with salt, pepper, and butter. The cheese added calcium while eggs provided protein when meat was saved for dinner. Children scraped their bowls clean. Teenagers ate double portions before being sent on errands. Grits with cheese and fried eggs represented practical wisdom of feeding families well on limited budgets. Marzipan fruits were the artistic candies that transformed almond paste into miniature apples, oranges, bananas, and pears, almost too beautiful to eat. Mothers kneaded almond paste with powdered sugar until smooth, then divided it into portions and tinted each with food coloring. Small pieces were shaped by hand into fruit forms, with toothpicks creating texture and cloves serving as stems. The finished fruits were sometimes brushed with egg white for shine or dusted with colored sugar for sparkle. Children were fascinated by how realistic the tiny fruits looked, lined up on plates like produce from a fairy tale market. Making marzipan required patience and artistic skill, each fruit taking several minutes to shape properly. The flavor was intensely almond, sweet, and slightly chewy with that distinctive paste texture. These candies appeared at fancy holiday parties and were given as special gifts to neighbors and friends. Marzipan fruits showed that candy making could be true artistry. Fried potato cakes made from leftover mashed potatoes became Thanksgiving morning crispy treats that children begged for. Grandmothers mixed cold mashed potatoes with beaten eggs, chopped onions, and flour, forming patties that fried until golden brown and crusty. The outside turned crispy while the inside stayed soft and fluffy. These cakes used potatoes left from testing recipes or from earlier preparations. Served with butter or gravy, they provided filling breakfast that cost virtually nothing. In Black households where waste was never acceptable, fried potato cakes represented culinary intelligence. Children ate them hot off the skillet, burning their fingers but too eager to wait. Adults enjoyed them with coffee, appreciating how yesterday's side dish became today's featured breakfast. The cakes could be made quickly, freeing grandmothers to focus on dinner. Fried potato cakes proved resourcefulness could transform leftovers. Frozen fruit salad was the jewel of holiday buffets, its pastel sweetness providing cool contrast to hot, savory dishes crowding Christmas tables. Cream cheese was whipped with mayonnaise until smooth, then folded together with whipped cream, canned fruit cocktail, maraschino cherries, and miniature marshmallows. Some versions added crushed pineapple or mandarin oranges for extra fruit presents. The mixture was poured into loaf pans and frozen solid, then sliced into pink-tinged rounds that held their shape beautifully on lettuce-lined platters. The texture was unlike anything else on the table. Frozen yet creamy, sweet yet tangy from the cream cheese base. Children adored it, begging for extra slices, while adults appreciated how it could be made weeks in advance. The salad straddled categories, appearing sometimes with sides and sometimes with desserts. Frozen fruit salad represented the 1970s love of make-ahead entertaining, proving that planning could produce something genuinely delightful. Bread stuffing balls were individual portions of holiday stuffing shaped and baked until crispy outside and tender within, eliminating serving challenges of casserole-style dressing. The stuffing mixture, cubed bread, celery, onions, sage, and broth, was formed into golf ball-sized spheres and arranged on baking sheets. A brush of melted butter before baking ensured golden, crispy exteriors, while interiors stayed moist. Each guest received their own perfect portion. No fighting over corner pieces or soggy centers. Children especially loved the novelty of stuffing they could pick up, and adults appreciated increased ratio of crispy surface to soft interior. Some cooks added sausage or chestnuts, creating richer balls. The individual portions made serving easier, no digging through casserole dishes while juggling plates. Bread stuffing balls represented creative problem-solving in holiday kitchens, taking a traditional dish and reimagining its presentation for practical and delicious results. Bacon drippings gravy over day-old cornbread was Thanksgiving morning thrift that transformed yesterday's bread into today's satisfying meal. Bacon grease saved from frying was heated in skillets. Flour was whisked in to create roux, then milk was added to make creamy gravy. This savory sauce was poured generously over crumbled, day-old cornbread that soaked it up like a sponge. The result was filling, flavorful, and cost virtually nothing. Grandmothers never threw away bacon drippings, storing them in jars to use for cooking and flavoring. The gravy provided fat and calories needed during cold months, while the cornbread offered substance. Children ate this without complaint, enjoying the rich flavors. Adults appreciated the ingenuity of making leftovers feel intentional. Bacon drippings gravy over cornbread proved that even the simplest ingredients could create satisfaction. Duchess potatoes transformed humble mashed potatoes into piped rosettes, worthy of any French restaurant, their golden peaks adding architectural drama to holiday platters. Potatoes were boiled, mashed with butter and egg yolks, then seasoned carefully before being loaded into pastry bags with star tips. The mixture was piped onto baking sheets in decorative swirls, then baked until peaks turned golden while centers stayed creamy. The technique required practice. The mixture needed the right consistency to pipe smoothly without being too soft to hold shape. Hostesses who mastered Duchess potatoes earned reputations as accomplished cooks. The presentation elevated what might otherwise be another bowl of mashed potatoes into something guests photographed before eating. Children were often assigned counting duties, ensuring each guest received their share. Duchess potatoes proved that technique could transform the ordinary into the extraordinary, requiring only skill rather than expensive ingredients. Sweet potato soufflé was the showstopper that made guests gasp when it emerged from the oven, puffed high and golden like an edible cloud. Unlike dense casseroles, the soufflé required whipping potatoes with eggs separated carefully, yolks beaten into warm puree, whites whipped stiff and folded in at the last moment. The mixture was seasoned with cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla, sweetened with brown sugar, and sometimes enriched with bourbon. Baked in a straight-sided dish, it would rise dramatically, its top browning while the interior stayed impossibly light. Timing was everything. The soufflé had to travel from oven to table immediately before it could deflate. Children pressed their faces to oven doors, watching the miraculous rise with wonder. The texture was unlike anything else, simultaneously creamy and ethereal, sweet but not cloying. Sweet potato soufflé represented kitchen ambition, a willingness to attempt something difficult for the reward of witnessing that collective intake of breath around the table. Biscuits with sorghum syrup and butter were Thanksgiving morning luxury made affordable through grandmother's baking skills and pantry staples. The biscuits were made from scratch using flour, lard, buttermilk, and baking powder, rolled out and cut with drinking glasses before being baked until golden. Sorghum syrup, cheaper than maple and more flavorful than corn syrup, was drizzled generously over split biscuits slathered with butter. The combination created flavors that felt indulgent, though the cost was minimal. Black families treasured sorghum because it connected them to Southern farming traditions and provided sweetness during hard times. Grandmothers kept large tins of sorghum in pantries, knowing it would last months. Thanksgiving morning biscuits were made fresh, still warm when served. Children ate them eagerly, syrup dripping down their chins. Adults savored them slowly, appreciating the craftsmanship required for perfect biscuits. Buckeyes were the peanut butter balls dipped in chocolate to resemble Ohio's state nut, with their signature spot of tan peeking through dark coating. Mothers mixed peanut butter with butter, powdered sugar, and sometimes crispy rice cereal until the mixture was firm enough to roll. Each ball was chilled, then skewered with a toothpick and dipped into melted chocolate, leaving the top exposed. The two-tone appearance made Buckeyes instantly recognizable, their name honoring the Buckeye tree whose nuts they resembled. Children loved the combination of smooth peanut butter filling and crisp chocolate shell, often eating them in 2 bites to appreciate each texture separately. The candies were particularly beloved in Midwestern families, where Buckeye trees grew and state pride ran strong. Making Buckeyes became a family assembly line, with children rolling balls while mothers handled the hot chocolate. These candies proved that regional traditions could spread nationwide when the flavor was this good. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Hot buttered rum batter was comfort in a jar, a promise kept through the cold and quiet of long December nights. It was made from butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and sometimes a pinch of clove, all creamed together until smooth, golden, and fragrant. A spoonful of this mixture would be dropped into a mug, followed by boiling water and a dash of dark rum that turned the drink into liquid warmth. The first sip felt like standing beside a hearth, sweet, spiced, and steadying to the bones. It was not just a drink, but a ritual, a pause between the bustle of shopping and the hush of midnight. Families kept jars in their refrigerators all season long, ready for guests, stories, and sudden snowfalls. The scent of caramel and spice filled the home, softening the edges of winter's chill. Today, instant cocoa and coffee packets have replaced the slow comfort of hot buttered rum. But in the memory of anyone who ever tasted it, that jar meant more than convenience. It meant care, patience, and the knowledge that the smallest spoonful could warm the longest night. Coconut haystacks were the quick confection that mothers could make even on the busiest December days, requiring nothing more than melted chocolate and shredded coconut. Butterscotch or chocolate chips were melted carefully, then stirred with sweetened coconut until every strand was coated. Dropped by spoonfuls onto waxed paper, the haystacks set into rough mounds that looked exactly like their farmyard namesakes. Children could help make these, stirring the mixture and dropping candies, learning basics without hot sugar dangers. The texture combined the snap of set chocolate with the chew of coconut, each bite delivering both crunch and softness. Some mothers added chopped nuts or used white chocolate, while others stuck with the classic their own mothers had made. Haystacks were democratic candy, easy enough for beginners, yet beloved enough that skilled candy makers included them on holiday plates. They disappeared quickly at gatherings, their simplicity making them more rather than less appealing. Cornmeal mush with sorghum butter filled stomachs and provided sustained energy for the long cooking day ahead. The mush was made by slowly cooking coarse cornmeal in water or milk until it thickened into smooth porridge, stirred constantly to prevent lumps. Sorghum butter came from beating softened butter with dark sorghum syrup until it turned golden and spreadable, creating sweetness without expensive sugar. Served hot in bowls with generous dollops melting on top, this breakfast cost pennies but delivered warmth. In rural homes where money was tight but corn was abundant, this dish appeared regularly on Thanksgiving morning. Grandmothers understood that starting with hot food meant children would be patient while the feast was prepared. The cornmeal's earthy flavor balanced perfectly with sorghum's deep molasses notes. Families ate in shifts, with the cook eating last. This wasn't deprivation, but resourcefulness transformed into tradition. Candied citron pound cake was the kind of Christmas gift that carried love farther than words could reach. Dense, golden, and fragrant with sugar and citrus peel, it was baked in advance, wrapped in wax paper, and sent across towns or oceans. Each loaf was a message. I remember you, even from here. Families baked it for soldiers, friends, and neighbors, its buttery scent filling the kitchen with both hope and longing. The cake itself was firm and sweet, studded with jewels of candied citron that gleamed when sliced. It aged beautifully, its flavor deepening day by day, a reward for patience and care. The first bite was bright and tender, the kind of taste that reminded people of home. It was both luxury and comfort, proof that generosity could be baked by hand. Over time, artificial extracts and cheap substitutes dulled its glow, and the ritual disappeared into history. But open an old tin or read a grandmother's recipe, and you can almost smell it again: the citrus, the butter, and the devotion that once traveled by mail. Baked pineapple casserole was the sweet surprise that appeared beside holiday hams, its tropical flavor providing brightness amid heavier winter fare. Canned pineapple chunks were combined with sugar, flour, and sharp cheddar cheese, a combination that sounded strange but tasted magnificent. The mixture was topped with buttery cracker crumbs and baked until bubbling and golden, cheese melting into strings that stretched with each serving. The dish straddled sweet and savory in ways that confused first-time tasters but converted them by second bite. Children loved its candy-like sweetness, while adults appreciated how pineapple's acid cut through rich ham. Some recipes added eggs for custard-like texture, while others kept it chunky. This casserole required minimal preparation but delivered maximum impact, making it a favorite of hostesses managing multiple dishes. Baked pineapple casserole represented the era's willingness to experiment, proving strange pairings sometimes became beloved traditions. Corn pudding was Southern hospitality baked into a custard, turning humble canned corn into something rich enough for Christmas tables. Cooks combined creamed corn with eggs, milk, butter, and sugar, sometimes adding flour to help it set. The mixture was poured into buttered dishes and cooked slowly until the top turned golden, while the interior remained soft and spoonable. The texture fell somewhere between cornbread and custard, dense yet creamy, with pops of whole kernels throughout. Some families added diced chilies for savory depth, while purists kept it simple. The dish required careful temperature management, as cooking too fast would curdle the eggs. Grandmothers knew exactly when to pull it from the oven, that moment when the center still jiggled slightly but would firm as it cooled. Corn pudding represented transformation of pantry staples into celebration food, proof that special occasions could be honored without expensive ingredients. Today it appears occasionally at Southern tables but has largely faded. Ribbon gelatin molds were a Christmas miracle of patience and precision. Layer after layer, red, green, white, each one had to set before the next could be poured. Housewives guarded their molds like prized possessions, careful not to rush or ruin the design. The result was a shimmering masterpiece that looked like stained glass under the dining room light. Kids stared at it in wonder, while adults admired the effort it took to pull off something so delicate. Served in perfect slices, it was a symbol of pride and skill as much as taste. Sweet, tangy, and light, it was a small victory in a decade obsessed with beauty and order. When boxed gelatin lost its charm, so did these edible ornaments. Today, no one has the time or patience to make a dessert that waits for you, but those bright, wobbly layers once defined holiday joy. Penuche was the brown sugar fudge that Northeastern families considered essential to Christmas, its maple-like flavor distinguishing it from ordinary chocolate versions. Mothers cooked brown sugar, cream, and butter to soft ball stage, then beat in vanilla and sometimes chopped walnuts until the mixture turned creamy and thick. The brown sugar gave penuche a distinctive caramel undertone that was richer and more complex than white sugar could provide. Poured into pans and cut into squares, the fudge had a lighter color than chocolate but an equally satisfying texture. Children who grew up with penuche often preferred it to chocolate fudge, finding its flavor more interesting and less intense. The candy was particularly popular in areas where maple production made brown sugar flavors familiar and beloved. Penuche recipes were often closely guarded, with each family claiming their version was best. This fudge represented regional candy traditions that mothers preserved through generations of December kitchen work. Harvard Beets brought deep crimson elegance to holiday tables, their sweet and sour glaze glistening like rubies under dining room lights. The dish took its name from the university whose color it matched, though the connection ended there. Cooks sliced cooked beets into rounds, then simmered them in sauce of sugar, cornstarch, vinegar, and butter until the glaze thickened and coated each piece. The result was simultaneously sweet and tangy, earthiness balanced by bright acidity. Some recipes called for orange zest or cloves, adding complexity to the straightforward preparation. The vibrant color made Harvard beets a visual dream, adding drama to tables dominated by browns and beiges. Children often resisted at first, but the sweet glaze converted many skeptics. This was practical cooking too, as canned beets worked perfectly fine when fresh ones were unavailable during winter. Harvard beets represented an era when vegetables were dressed up for company, transformed from everyday nutrition into worthy holiday companions. Fried cabbage with fatback was Thanksgiving morning vegetables that provided fiber and vitamins alongside rich pork flavor. Fresh cabbage was shredded and cooked slowly in cast-iron skillets with sliced fatback until the cabbage wilted and absorbed the pork's smoky richness. The fatback rendered its fat, coating every strand of cabbage with savory goodness. This breakfast was economical because cabbage was cheap and plentiful during fall, while fatback provided flavoring from preserved pork. Grandmothers cooked this when resources were tight but nutrition was still needed. The cabbage softened but retained slight texture, creating comfort without being mushy. Children sometimes resisted vegetables at breakfast but ate this willingly because of the bacon-like flavor. Adults valued how the dish provided greens without feeling like health food. Fried cabbage with fatback represented the wisdom of making vegetables appealing through fat and flavor. Candied orange peel transformed citrus scraps into jewel-like confections that looked almost too pretty to eat but tasted too good to resist. Mothers sliced orange peels into strips, boiled them repeatedly to remove bitterness, then simmered them in sugar syrup until translucent. Drained and tossed in granulated sugar, the peels sparkled like amber gems, their texture chewy and intensely flavored. Some mothers dipped theirs in dark chocolate, the bitter cocoa complementing sweet citrus perfectly. The candy took days to make properly, requiring multiple blanching sessions, but results were unlike anything from stores. Children were often surprised by how much they loved candied peel, expecting bitterness and finding instead concentrated orange sunshine. Arranged on plates alongside other candies, the peels added color and sophistication that elevated the entire spread. This was the candy that showed a mother's dedication, her willingness to transform what others discarded into something beautiful. Oyster dressing was Christmas on the coast, where the ocean met the table. It was made with bread cubes, celery, onions, and oysters stirred in at the very end, so the flavor stayed gentle and briny. For many families, it wasn't Christmas dinner without it. The scent of butter, sea, and sage filled the house long before the guests arrived. It was a dish that carried generations, fishermen, grandmothers, Sunday cooks, all leaving their mark with one small change to the recipe. It wasn't fancy, but it was rich in its own right, proof that you didn't need wealth to have something special. As seafood prices rose and tastes changed, the old coastal dressing disappeared from most menus. But for those who grew up with it, no stuffing since has ever felt quite right. Divinity was the cloud-like confection that announced the Christmas season had officially arrived, its snowy white peaks appearing on plates across America every December. Mothers beat egg whites until stiff, then slowly poured in boiling sugar syrup while the mixer ran at high speed, whipping air into the mixture until it turned glossy and held its shape. The process required perfect timing and dry weather. Humidity was Divinity's enemy, turning fluffy into sticky disaster. Chopped pecans or walnuts were folded in at the last moment, adding crunch to each pillowy bite. Dropped by spoonfuls onto waxed paper, the candy set into irregular peaks that looked like tiny meringue mountains. Children would hover nearby, waiting for permission to lick the beaters clean. The texture was unlike anything store-bought, light enough to dissolve on the tongue, yet substantial enough to satisfy. Divinity couldn't be rushed or faked, making it a labor of love that mothers undertook specifically because their children begged for it year after year. Harvard Beets brought deep crimson elegance to holiday tables, their sweet and sour glaze glistening like rubies under dining room lights. The dish took its name from the university whose color it matched, though the connection ended there. Cooks sliced cooked beets into rounds, then simmered them in sauce of sugar, cornstarch, vinegar, and butter until the glaze thickened and coated each piece. The result was simultaneously sweet and tangy, earthiness balanced by bright acidity. Some recipes called for orange zest or cloves, adding complexity to the straightforward preparation. The vibrant color made Harvard Beets a visual dream, adding drama to tables dominated by browns and beiges. Children often resisted at first, but the sweet glaze converted many skeptics. This was practical cooking too, as canned beets worked perfectly fine when fresh ones were unavailable during winter. Harvard Beets represented an era when vegetables were dressed up for company, transformed from everyday nutrition into worthy holiday companions. Ribbon candy was the impossibly thin, ruffled confection that looked like frozen silk and required true artistry to create. Molten sugar was pulled and folded repeatedly until it developed a satiny sheen, then stretched into long ribbons and pleated while still pliable. The process required speed and skill. The candy had to be folded before it cooled and cracked. Mothers who mastered ribbon candy were considered artists, their delicate creations displayed proudly on holiday tables. The candy came in multiple colors, often striped, with each hue representing a different flavor from peppermint to cinnamon to wintergreen. Children were warned to handle ribbon candy carefully, its thin edges fragile as glass. Eating it meant carefully breaking off pieces that shattered and dissolved, releasing intense sweetness. Ribbon candy appeared in decorative tins at fancy stores, but homemade versions were fresher and more impressive. This candy represented the highest level of Christmas confectionery skill. Coca-Cola glazed roast duck was the sweet showstopper of mid-century Southern Christmas tables. Housewives clipped the recipe from glossy magazines and bragged about the glossy glaze that only cola could make. The sugar caramelized as it baked, coating the skin in a syrupy shell that crackled under the knife. Every slice glistened, tender meat beneath a sticky, spiced crust that tasted like something halfway between candy and luxury. It was playful, a little daring, and perfectly suited to an era that loved spectacle as much as flavor. Guests would lean in, curious and delighted, asking how such a strange idea worked so well. But as tastes turned toward lighter fare and simpler roasting, the Coca-Cola duck vanished from holiday menus. Still, the thought of it, bold, unapologetic, and shining red-brown from the oven, feels like a reminder of a time when Christmas dared to be indulgent. Sweet potato coffee cake with cinnamon drizzle was the Thanksgiving morning centerpiece that brought families together before the turkey touched the oven. Grandmothers mashed leftover sweet potatoes into thick batter seasoned with nutmeg, cinnamon, and cloves, then baked it in cast-iron pans that created golden, crispy bottoms. The drizzle came from powdered sugar mixed with milk and vanilla, poured over while warm so it soaked into every crevice. This wasn't fancy bakery cake, but something born from thrift, using plentiful fall sweet potatoes. Families gathered around kitchen tables, cutting thick slices while coffee percolated. Children fought over corner pieces where the drizzle pooled. The cake stayed moist through the weekend. It represented more than food, it showed how grandmothers stretched resources while making mornings special. Today's brunches serve croissants, but they can't touch the memory of sweet potato coffee cake warming cold November mornings. Rum-soaked plum pudding was the grand finale of Christmas dinner, a dessert so dramatic it demanded silence before applause. It was mixed and steamed weeks in advance, stuffed with dried fruit, breadcrumbs, sweet spices, and dark molasses that gave it its heavy sweetness. On Christmas Day, it returned to the table crowned in brandy, lit with a match, and carried in a soft blue flame that shimmered like a blessing. Families gathered close to watch the fire dance across the pudding's glossy surface, the scent of rum and sugar filling the air. The first spoonful was rich, spicy, and faintly smoky from the flame, a taste that lingered like memory itself. It was a dessert of patience, one that required time, heat, and courage to perfect. As quicker sweets appeared and fear of fat and fire crept in, the old plum pudding faded into legend. But for those who remember it, there was nothing quite like that moment. The hush, the flicker of light, and the warmth that came from more than just the brandy. It was food that celebrated endurance and joy, proof that even the darkest winter could glow with sweetness and flame. Popcorn balls were the crunchy, sweet spheres that mothers shaped by hand every December, their sticky surfaces catching both popcorn and children's attention. Freshly popped corn was drizzled with hot sugar syrup flavored with vanilla or molasses, then quickly gathered and pressed into balls while still warm enough to hold together. The process required buttered hands and high heat tolerance, as the syrup needed to be hot enough to coat evenly. Once cooled, each ball was wrapped in waxed paper or cellophane tied with ribbon, ready for giving. Children loved the combination of salty popcorn and sweet coating, the way each ball crunched and stuck slightly to teeth. Some mothers tinted their syrup with food coloring, creating red and green balls for the holidays. Popcorn balls appeared at school parties, church gatherings, and on doorsteps as gifts for neighbors. They represented accessible candy making that families could do together. Tom and Jerry Holiday Punch wasn't a cartoon. It was the drink that made Christmas evenings glow. Made from beaten eggs, sugar, brandy, and rum, it was warm, foamy, and rich enough to chase the chill from any snowstorm. Families would gather around the punch bowl as steam rose from the mugs, the scent of nutmeg hanging in the air. It wasn't a fancy cocktail, it was home comfort in liquid form. Every sip carried the cheer of togetherness and the kind of laughter that only came once a year. It took patience to make, stirring the eggs until they turned to silk, whisking the heat just right. One wrong move and it would curdle, so you had to care about it, like most things that truly mattered. As instant mixes and bottled drinks replaced homemade warmth, the Tom and Jerry slipped into memory. But for those who tasted it, the holidays have never felt quite as alive again. Shrimp dip in a bread bowl was pure indulgence wrapped in nostalgia. Creamy, rich, and brimming with shrimp, it was the centerpiece of Christmas buffets across America. Hosts would hollow out round loaves of bread, fill them with warm seafood dip, and surround them with cubes of bread for dipping. The presentation alone was a showstopper, the kind that made guests lean in with curiosity. The dip itself was luxurious for its time. Cream cheese, mayonnaise, lemon, and shrimp folded together until velvety smooth. It was served at everything from office parties to neighborhood gatherings, an edible symbol of generosity and good taste. When people think of 1970s entertaining, this dish defines it. Comforting, shareable, and proudly over the top. The bread soaked up every drop of flavor until nothing was left but crumbs and smiles. It was the perfect combination of heart, effort, and celebration, the kind of dish that made every party feel like a special occasion. Fantasy Fudge was the miracle recipe that appeared on marshmallow cream jars and made foolproof fudge accessible to every mother. The recipe combined sugar, butter, and evaporated milk with chocolate chips and marshmallow cream, eliminating the tricky temperature monitoring that traditional fudge required. Mothers boiled the sugar mixture for exactly 5 minutes, then stirred in the chips and cream until everything melted into glossy perfection. The result was smoother and creamier than old-fashioned fudge, with a texture that practically melted on the tongue. Children didn't care that this version was easier. They only knew it tasted incredible and appeared every Christmas. Poured into pans and cut into squares, Fantasy Fudge had the same satisfying density as traditional recipes, but with far less risk of failure. The recipe spread through communities during the 1970s, photocopied and shared between friends. Fantasy Fudge democratized candy making, proving that delicious homemade treats didn't require years of practice. Coffee jelly with whipped cream was elegance born from leftovers, the calling card of a 1950s hostess who could turn the simplest thing into something that looked like magic. Cold coffee was mixed with sugar and gelatin, poured into molds, and chilled until it set with a shine like dark glass. It was cut into tidy cubes and topped with a swirl of whipped cream that melted slowly into the surface. Served in small cocktail glasses, it looked like sophistication in miniature, simple, modern, and quietly daring. Guests marveled at how something made from yesterday's pot of coffee could look so polished and taste so refined. The flavor was smooth, bittersweet, and grown-up, a dessert that whispered instead of shouted. Housewives loved it because it could be made in advance, chilled, and brought out just as the conversation turned toward compliments. It was thrift disguised as glamour, a lesson in making do with grace. Then coffee became something to gulp, not savor, and the jelly slipped away from holiday tables. Yet in every cup of strong, cooled coffee, there lingers the ghost of that shimmering dessert, a reminder that even the most ordinary things can feel extraordinary with a little care and imagination. Chocolate-covered cherries were the elegant confection that felt almost too fancy for home kitchens, yet mothers across America crafted them by the dozen each December. Maraschino cherries were drained and wrapped in fondant, a sweet, creamy mixture that would eventually liquefy inside the chocolate shell. Each wrapped cherry was dipped in tempered chocolate and set on waxed paper to harden. The magic happened over the following days as enzymes in the fondant converted sugar into liquid, creating that distinctive syrupy center. Children learned patience waiting for chocolate-covered cherries to properly ripen, knowing that fresh-dipped candies were too firm and needed time. The first bite through the chocolate shell released sweet cherry juice that mixed with creamy fondant. These candies appeared in fancy boxes at department stores, but homemade versions were fresher, with plumper cherries and thicker chocolate. Mothers took pride in creating something that looked store-bought but tasted infinitely better. Ham and pickle roll-ups were the simplest party trick in the 1970s playbook, yet they never failed to impress. A slice of deli ham spread thin with cream cheese, rolled tight around a dill pickle, and sliced into neat rounds. It was genius in its simplicity. Hosts loved them because they could be made ahead of time, chilled overnight, and served cold on silver trays without fuss. Guests loved them because they hit every flavor at once: salty, tangy, creamy, and crisp. These little spirals of joy appeared at every Christmas gathering, church potluck, and family reunion, vanishing faster than anything else on the table. The combination of pink ham and green pickle made them look festive too, a subtle nod to the colors of the season. Housewives clipped the recipe from magazines, knowing it would never fail. It was food that welcomed you in, that said, "We made something just for you." The crunch of that first bite, followed by the soft creaminess of the cheese, was the sound of holidays spent laughing with friends around a crowded kitchen table. Rum balls were the adult-friendly treat that children begged to taste despite, or perhaps because of, being told they couldn't. Mothers would crush vanilla wafers into fine crumbs, then mix them with cocoa powder, powdered sugar, corn syrup, chopped pecans, and enough rum to bind everything together. The mixture was rolled into small balls, then coated in more powdered sugar, cocoa, or finely chopped nuts. No baking was required, making rum balls perfect for busy December days when ovens were already occupied. The flavor was sophisticated, the rum mellowing as the balls aged and integrating with chocolate and nuts into something complex. Some mothers made batches with less rum specifically for children, though kids always wanted the real thing. Stored in tins, rum balls improved over several days, the flavors deepening and the texture becoming more tender. They were passed at adult gatherings and tucked into gift boxes for teachers and neighbors, a candy that bridged the gap between cookie and confection. Ambrosia salad with whipped Dream Whip was the glowing bowl of color every 1960s table needed. There was something innocent and festive about it. Tiny marshmallows, canned fruit, coconut flakes, and that sweet whipped topping folded until it looked like snow. Housewives adored it because it was easy, cheerful, and foolproof, the perfect match for the glimmer of tinsel and the flicker of colored lights. It looked fancy enough for guests, but cost next to nothing to make. Kids would sneak spoonfuls when no one was looking, drawn by that sugar cloud smell. You could always find it chilling beside a glass dish of cranberry sauce, a sign that the feast had begun. Dream Whip made it smooth and glossy, almost too pretty to eat, a vision of mid-century optimism. Now it sits in the forgotten pages of community cookbooks, too sweet and too sincere for today's tables, a ghost of holiday magic that once shimmered bright. Homemade Divinity candy tested every baker's patience, skill, and faith in the weather. It was made from sugar, corn syrup, egg whites, and the hope that the air outside would stay perfectly dry. If there was even a hint of humidity, the mixture refused to set, collapsing into sticky defeat. On cold, crisp afternoons, though, the magic happened. The mixture turned glossy, white, and light as a cloud. It was dropped by spoonfuls onto wax paper, forming mounds of sweetness that looked like winter snow. Families would crowd the kitchen, taking turns stirring and watching the thermometer like it was a sacred ritual. The sound of spoons scraping bowls, the smell of sugar rising, and the thrill of getting it just right made the whole day feel special. It was a candy that required attention, patience, and luck, a kind of edible miracle. Few people today have the time to wait for weather and sugar to agree, so the recipe sits quietly in old cookbooks. But for those who remember it, Divinity was more than a treat. It was proof that perfection could be fragile, fleeting, and worth the wait. Bacon-wrapped water chestnuts were one of those dishes that disappeared faster than anything else on the Christmas table. You could always tell when someone had just baked a batch. The smell of smoky bacon glazed with brown sugar would drift through the house and draw everyone in. They were small, easy to grab, and utterly addictive. The crunch of the water chestnut, hidden under layers of crisp bacon and caramelized sugar, gave them a texture like nothing else. People loved how one bite could deliver salt, sweetness, and warmth all at once. In the 1970s, when cocktail parties were an art form, these little gems were the definition of good taste and good company. You'd find them sitting in crystal bowls or passed around on platters, each one glistening in its syrupy glaze. What made them unforgettable was their simplicity. 3 ingredients, endless delight. They were the kind of appetizer that didn't need explaining. One taste said it all. Every holiday gathering had someone proudly announcing, "These are my famous bacon wraps," as guests reached for more. And even now, decades later, just the thought of that smell can bring you right back to a living room filled with laughter, record players, and the soft twinkle of Christmas lights. Pecan turtles were the candy that looked like their namesake, with pecan legs extending from caramel bodies topped with chocolate shells. Mothers arranged pecans in clusters on waxed paper, then spooned warm caramel over the centers, letting it flow between the nuts. Once the caramel set, each cluster was dipped in or drizzled with melted chocolate, creating the turtle's shell pattern. The combination of textures made turtles irresistible: crunchy pecans, chewy caramel, and smooth chocolate in every bite. Children loved helping arrange the pecan clusters, feeling like they were creating little candy creatures. The turtles required multiple steps and careful timing, as the caramel needed to be cool enough to hold shape, but warm enough to stick to the nuts. These candies were often saved for gift boxes and special occasions, their elaborate appearance making them feel more valuable than simpler confections. Pecan turtles proved that homemade candy could rival anything from expensive chocolate shops. Molasses taffy pulls were pure holiday fun before screens and schedules replaced togetherness. Families would gather in warm kitchens, rolling up their sleeves to stretch ropes of dark, sticky candy until it turned pale and glossy. The air was filled with laughter, steam, and the faint scent of burnt sugar. Children's hands got sticky, adults shared stories, and the night went by without anyone checking a clock. Once cooled and cut, the candy was wrapped in paper, a small, sweet prize for effort and patience. It wasn't just about the candy, it was about making something together. Those evenings built memories that lasted longer than any dessert. Today, few people even know how to make molasses taffy, but its legacy remains a symbol of the simple joy of doing things by hand. Spinach balls were small, green wonders that turned humble ingredients into pure party magic. Frozen spinach, breadcrumbs, cheese, and herbs were mixed together and baked until golden and fragrant. The result was a bite-sized morsel bursting with flavor, crispy on the outside and tender inside. They were practical too, easy to make ahead, easy to freeze, and even easier to eat. Guests loved popping them straight from the platter, one after another, until the tray was empty. The taste was warm and savory, with a hint of garlic and nutmeg that made them feel festive without being fussy. For many, they were the healthy appetizer that somehow didn't taste like one. Every bite carried the earthy aroma of spinach and the richness of Parmesan, perfectly balanced to please everyone at the table. In a decade obsessed with convenience, these were proof that you could make something wholesome and still have time to enjoy the party. Saltwater taffy was the pull-and-stretch candy that turned December kitchens into family workshops, children and parents working together until arms ached. Mothers would cook sugar, corn syrup, butter, and salt to the hard ball stage, adding food coloring and flavoring before pouring the hot mixture onto greased marble slabs or baking sheets. Once cool enough to handle, the taffy was gathered into ropes and pulled repeatedly, the stretching incorporating air that transformed the candy from dense and dark to light and glossy. Children took turns pulling, their small hands working alongside their mothers until the taffy turned satiny and began to hold its shape. Cut into bite-sized pieces and wrapped in waxed paper, each taffy was chewy, sweet, and impossibly fresh compared to anything from the store. The flavors ranged from peppermint to vanilla to fruit, each batch a different color. Making taffy was as much entertainment as production, a family activity that created memories alongside candy. Red Hots, cinnamon apples were Christmas color made edible, a bright scarlet treasure from the golden age of holiday cooking. Peeled apples simmered slowly in syrup made from Red Hots candies, butter, and sugar until their flesh turned tender and glowing. The scent of cinnamon filled the whole house, clinging to curtains and coats, mingling with pine and pie. On the table, they looked like ornaments under lamplight, glistening, fragrant, and a little mysterious. Served warm, they tasted sharp and sweet, a fiery contrast to the savory roasts beside them. They were playful, a little theatrical, and every bite felt like a celebration. Children loved them for their color, adults for their comfort, and together they made the meal feel complete. They were also practical, cheap, easy, and beautiful, a perfect mid-century trifecta. But as the candy aisle replaced the pantry and convenience became king, Red Hot's apples slipped quietly into history. Still, for those who ever tasted one fresh from the pot, its sweetness lingers like memory itself, simple, bright, and impossible to forget. Maple cream candy was the New England specialty that spread across America as families moved and carried recipes with them. Pure maple syrup was boiled to soft ball stage, then cooled and stirred vigorously until it transformed from glossy liquid to opaque, creamy solid. The stirring required patience and arm strength, as the maple crystallized slowly over many minutes of constant motion. Poured into molds or spread in pans and cut into squares, the candy had a texture somewhere between fudge and butter, melting instantly on the tongue. The flavor was pure concentrated maple, intensely sweet with that distinctive woodsy undertone that only real maple syrup provides. Children who grew up with maple cream candy considered it the finest sweet they'd ever tasted, nothing else quite matching its smooth richness. For families with New England roots, these candies connected Christmas to sugaring season and generations of tradition. Maple cream represented regional identity preserved through decades of December candy making. Stuffed celery logs might sound humble today, but in the 1970s they were a Christmas staple. Bright green celery sticks filled with pimento cheese or blue cheese spread brought color and crunch to every table. Arranged neatly on crystal trays, they looked fresh and festive among the heavier appetizers. They were light enough to nibble between sips of punch, but flavorful enough to stand out on their own. The contrast of creamy filling and crisp celery was classic, and every family had their own twist. Some added walnuts, others olives, some even sprinkled paprika for flair. They were the kind of dish that spoke of care, washed, filled, trimmed, and arranged by hand. The beauty of stuffed celery logs was that they belonged everywhere: church potlucks, office parties, or Christmas Eve buffets. They were healthy without trying, nostalgic without being fussy, and comforting in their simplicity. For many, just one bite can bring back the memory of Formica tables, colored glass plates, and the laughter of loved ones long gone. Cranberry orange congealed salad was a jewel-toned treasure from refrigerator cookery's golden age. The tang of cranberries met the sweetness of oranges and the creaminess of whipped cheese, all bound together in gelatin's glossy grip. Housewives took pride in how it gleamed under dining room lights, slicing it clean to show off the layers. It was sweet enough for dessert, but still called a salad, a clever way to balance indulgence and thrift. Nuts added crunch, oranges gave brightness, and cranberries tied it all back to the season. It was cool, festive, and unmistakably mid-century. Then came the downfall of molded foods and the age of fresh, and this dish faded like tinsel after New Year's Day. Still, for those who grew up with it, no modern salad captures that same sparkle of home and holiday. Peanut brittle shattered into golden shards that caught kitchen light like edible amber, its sweet, salty crunch echoing through holiday gatherings. Mothers boiled sugar, corn syrup, and water to the hard crack stage, then stirred in raw peanuts that toasted right in the molten candy. Butter and baking soda were added at the last moment, the soda creating tiny air bubbles that gave brittle its characteristic texture. The mixture was poured onto greased baking sheets and stretched thin while still pliable, requiring heat-resistant hands and quick movements. Once cooled, it was broken into irregular pieces ranging from paper-thin edges to thick, nut-studded centers. The combination of caramelized sugar and roasted peanuts created an addictive flavor that children couldn't resist. Tins of homemade peanut brittle were given as gifts to neighbors and teachers, though families kept the biggest pieces for themselves. This candy represented December traditions when mothers spent hours over hot stoves creating treats no store could match. Shrimp tree platter was not merely a dish, it was a conversation piece. You could walk into a 1970s holiday party and spot it from across the room, standing tall on the buffet table, wrapped in glimmering foil, and studded with tiny pink shrimp-like ornaments on silver pine. Hosts took great pride in crafting it, pinning cocktail shrimp in swirling patterns around a styrofoam cone covered in parsley, lemon slices, and sometimes even maraschino cherries for extra color. It was equal parts appetizer and spectacle, a true show of mid-century creativity. In an era obsessed with presentation, the shrimp tree represented festivity and ambition. Guests would circle around, laughing as they plucked shrimp off with toothpicks, dipping them into tangy cocktail sauce balanced in a bowl at the base. It brought a touch of glamour to suburban Christmas parties, evoking an image of high living even when it was all homemade. What made it iconic was the balance between decadence and practicality. Simple ingredients, grand results. The shrimp tree was proof that even on a modest budget, you could still impress, delight, and dazzle your guests. It was a centerpiece of joy, built with patience, served with pride, and remembered long after the holidays had passed. Peanut butter fudge was the creamy cousin to chocolate that children with nut cravings begged for every December. Mothers combined sugar, milk, and butter, cooking the mixture to softball stage before removing from heat and beating in generous scoops of peanut butter. The result was smoother than chocolate fudge, with a melt-in-your-mouth quality that made it dangerously easy to eat too much. Poured into buttered pans and cut into squares, the fudge had a pale tan color that looked almost like caramel but tasted purely of roasted peanuts. Some mothers swirled chocolate through the top, creating marbled patterns that made each piece unique. Children who preferred peanut butter to chocolate considered this their special candy, the one made just for them. The texture was softer than its chocolate counterpart, practically dissolving on the tongue without requiring much chewing. Peanut butter fudge represented the variations mothers created to ensure every child had a favorite on the Christmas candy plate. The wassail bowl was once the heartbeat of Christmas gatherings, a steaming punch that filled homes with warmth and cheer. Made from cider, ale, and brandy, spiced with cinnamon and cloves, it was ladled into mugs as voices rose in song. Wassailing wasn't just drinking, it was community. Neighbors went door to door, sharing music, toasts, and blessings for good fortune. The bowl would pass from hand to hand, its surface fogged from the heat, carrying the glow of fellowship through every sip. The taste was rich and tart, full of apple, spice, and something that felt like belonging. It wasn't about getting drunk. It was about being together in a cold, uncertain world. As modern celebrations grew quieter and more private, the wassail bowl was set aside. But its spirit still lingers in every shared toast at Christmas, waiting for someone brave enough to bring it back. Pralines were the creamy southern confection that melted on the tongue, their caramelized sugar and toasted pecans creating pure holiday indulgence. Mothers cooked sugar, butter, and cream until the mixture reached soft ball stage, then beat in vanilla and whole pecan halves until the candy turned opaque. Spooned quickly onto waxed paper, each praline spread into a flat disc with pecans arranged across its surface. The texture was what made pralines special. Not quite fudge, not quite caramel, but something uniquely smooth that dissolved into buttery sweetness. Families with Southern roots considered pralines essential to Christmas, passing recipes through generations. Children learned to recognize the specific shade of amber that meant the candy was ready, watching mothers work with chemist precision. The smell of cooking pralines filled houses with warmth that captured the entire holiday season. Pralines couldn't be hurried, requiring skill that mothers perfected over years of Christmas candy making. Party Rye pizza bites were the life of the party, crispy, cheesy, and irresistibly snackable. Made on tiny squares of cocktail rye bread, they were topped with sausage, melted cheddar, and a dusting of oregano. The smell alone could fill a house with anticipation. These little toasts were bite-sized comfort, meant to be eaten standing up, laughing with a drink in hand. They were a favorite for busy hosts who needed something hearty but quick. Guests loved how they packed so much flavor into something so small. The texture was perfection, the crunch of the toast meeting the gooey melt of cheese. Magazine ads of the decade called them mini pizzas for the modern hostess, and that's exactly what they were: fast, fun, and delicious. Party Rye pizza bites captured the flavor of the 1970s in one perfect mouthful: simple, social, and endlessly satisfying. Which forgotten Christmas recipe deserves a place on your holiday table again? Share your family's lost favorite in the comments. Hit like and subscribe so we can keep rescuing these traditions before they vanish forever.